This is Creative Banter, a creativity and philosophy-focused podcast hosted by Cody Schultz and Ben Horn. Back in November, I submitted 13 photographs for Brooks Jensen of Lenswork magazine to review, as well as a few questions which I wanted answered. These questions had nothing to do with my photographic work. Rather, they revolved around the business side of photography, how to market your work, how to price your prints, etc. A few days ago, around 11 o'clock at night, I received an email with a review. I knew that if I listened to it then and there, my night could be ruined, as well as any potential of sleep. But if I waited until morning, it would be my entire day that was ruined instead. Can you tell by now how optimistic of a person I am? Throughout the episode, Ben and I discuss what was said during this review, as well as what it means for me as a photographer moving forward. Let's dive right into this, shall we? So you mentioned about a little trip that you took. Why don't we start off with that one?
Yeah. So I drove up to Orange County yesterday, which is a little less than a 2-hour drive, basically halfway between here and Los Angeles. And I was going there to sell my camera. Yeah. So, I have more than one camera, but for ever since 2017, I've used a Arca Swiss as my primary camera. And I love that camera, but I also am the type of person, and I don't know how you are in this regard, but if there's something I have that especially has some value to it, and I probably won't be using it as much as I should, I'm happy enough to move it along.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah. And it's I think it feels a little bit wasteful if I have something that I can use those funds for something else. And this stems back to my recent fall trip to Zion. And on that trip, the first day I used the Arca Swiss, and I love that camera. It's a fantastic camera. And as I'd mentioned in, I believe, a past episode, it's a bit of a heavier camera than the Chamonix, but it's really, I have to carry it in a backpack that weighs about 10 pounds more than the other backpack. And all this sort of stuff adds up to the point where it's, I'm not getting any younger. And and having a lightweight camera is nice. So I found a fantastic owner. He's a portrait photographer from up in the Los Angeles area. And so for the first time in this camera's life, it will be pointed at people and not away from people. Yeah, so it would be a very well-balanced approach. But it was fun. I went up there yesterday and met with him. His name's Marcus, and kind of showing him the ins and outs of the camera and getting him familiar with it and everything. But I think one of the things I've learned through the years is I need to constantly kind of figure out what direction it is I want to go on, sort of evaluate the way that I do things. And sometimes it's a matter of trying something different, seeing how that works, and perhaps that leads you into a different direction. And just like a while back, I'd purchased a digital kit just to see if my thoughts were still the same on that. And I ended up, selling that kit because it just wasn't quite the direction I wanted to go. But I think for me, a lighter, simpler setup is what will allow me to produce the sort of work that I'm very satisfied with. And perhaps to be able to shoot some of those photos, kind of like the ones where you shoot, where you see something, that subject right then, right there, set up for it, sort of the reactionary sort of photography. That's something that I can't do as much if my camera's back in my truck, whereas I can hike around with a really lightweight kit and have it on my back, and I think be able to have that type of photography as well. So it'll be
just
a
opens
change.
up a lot of other opportunities for you too.
It does.
Like a lot of, not even just like photographic opportunities per se, but opportunities of where you can go with a camera, because now you
Yes.
have less weight on your back, so your body's more agile. So you're able to climb to different areas, get squeeze into different places, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and really explore more without having that general fatigue that you may experience with a larger camera like that.
Yeah, and plus the fact that perhaps that will be something that allows me to spend even a little bit more time in the field, because I typically get wiped out after a certain number of days. But who knows? Maybe this will be the sort of thing where I get just a little bit more energy from this that allow me to stay in the field a little bit longer. Because my favorite photo for my fall trip, it was in the second episode where it's this oak leaf, and we talked about in past episodes, oak leaf against some dried mud.
Right.
But I just happened to have the camera with me that day when I was out scouting, and I may not have had that camera with me otherwise if I had a bigger setup. So things like that, those sort of spur of the moment opportunities, I think are going to be a little easier with this setup. But I definitely think it's important to not completely get locked into doing things just because that's the way we've always done them, but to do little tweaks here and there. Nothing huge and crazy like, buying a very expensive digital kit, but stuff like just little tweaks here and there. And I think it kind of allows you to find your own direction that way.
Now, was Marcus a follower of yours, or how did that all work out with him finding out about you selling your camera?
Yeah, so we've sort of communicated in the past,
Okay.
And message, and he actually messaged me about the camera, some questions about it, and I was actually I was on vacation at the time with my wife. We were in Maui at the time, and I was just sitting on the lanai looking out at the ocean. I got messaged some questions about it, so I'm, we're just kind of going back and forth, and I had mentioned that I've been thinking about selling the one that I have, and so we just kind of went from there.
Okay.
But it worked out really well because I did not want to ship the camera.
Yeah.
Something of that value, something that can perhaps be a little bit fragile if it's not handled well in transit. And so it worked out really well that he was just a couple hours drive away, and we're able to hand it off. I was able to, show him how the camera works and everything.
That's the best part about that too.
Yeah.
Especially from like his perspective, because there's probably so much with that camera that is different even from like the Chamonix in terms of setup and all of that, I'm sure. So
yeah, for sure.
Having that kind of like hands-on experience of like mentoring moment from someone who's used it for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like the little, it's like it's like you're selling a car, and there's like something like, or maybe like one of the doors closes a little weird. You can give them like a heads up about something. Here's the way that you jiggle the handle, and any sort of thing that's associated with that. But yeah, anytime you have something like something like the Arca Swiss camera, where there's not a lot of people necessarily looking to purchase them on the used market. And so you have, just because of the expense of the camera, you have a very small audience of people looking to buy it. So I think this was just a wonderful opportunity for the both of us, where he's able to get a really, really nice camera and just make it a really smooth transaction. And so, yeah, I'm very, very happy with how it worked out, and looking forward to taking the Chamonix on many adventures in the years to come, and with lighter weight on my back as well.
Yeah, that's gonna be a big help, I'm sure. Because even with like the 4x5, I'm still getting used to that weight and getting used to the difference between what a digital camera weighs in the bag versus what 4x5 with all of the accessories weighs.
Yeah.
And that's really why I keep my kit so minimal. I mean, when I'm out, I'm really only carrying maybe 2 or 3 film holders, the singular lens that I have, the camera, light meter, and tripod.
Yeah.
And not much more than that, just because I want to be as light as I can.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting when I go to Acadia, because I think that's where we're going to be going this summer again. When I go there for a camping trip, they have this little island that you can get off to. I think I've mentioned it before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just the idea that this will be pretty much the first long-term camping trip where I'm not camping out in my car, like a traditional spot like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, so now I got to figure out how to keep my bag as light as possible and how to organize everything and do all that fun stuff. So I'm looking forward to it, but
Have you booked that trip yet?
not yet.
Okay.
I think April is when their reservations and everything open up for it. So I got to figure out exactly when we plan on going and then book it as soon as I can. And if I'm not able to get over to that island, like for this trip particularly, I'll definitely plan something like later on in the year or something like that. But
well, that's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, especially after last year, when you didn't get out too much.
yeah, definitely. When I had all of those plans that got nixed because of COVID and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, but at least you were incredibly consistent. So, consistency is a very important aspect of being a photographer, but consistent in not getting out maybe isn't as beneficial.
Yeah, no. I am hoping to get out this weekend, though. So that'll be I haven't been out in about 2 months, I think. Camera's kind of getting a little dusty in my bag, so I should probably...
Yeah.
Plus, the weather here has been so warm. Like, it's 50 degrees, 55 degrees outside right now.
Huh.
I'm like, it's January. Like,
yeah.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I was checking the... because on my phone, I have saved various locations for the weather app. And so I just kind of go through them every now and then. I was looking at Springdale, which is where Zion is. I'm like, oh, they're going to get a good amount of snow today. And I was looking at that. I'm like, oh, that'd be nice. I'm over it. I'll get there at some point in the season, but yeah, it's always fun to see when that place gets transformed by snow. But I'm perfectly fine not being there, just waiting for when the conditions are right, when I can actually get that way.
Yeah. When do you plan on going back?
So sometime after mid-January, I think is when I will start really keeping my eye on the weather. And it's a matter of seeing if there's a storm on the way. And if not, I'll probably head over to Death Valley. The only thing with Death Valley is that of the massive flooding and flash floods and everything they had from the summer storms, some of the roads still aren't open. Most of them are. But there's a road that goes through the northern part of the park that still hasn't been cleared yet. And that's one where I have some locations right off that road that I revisit each year. And so those areas wouldn't be accessible yet. But I think they're saying like early February is when that should open. So it's up until probably about mid-March or so that Death Valley is very doable. So there could perhaps be a couple trips in store if I head out there and that road's not open yet, but it opens a little bit later on. But then also in March at some point I have jury duty potentially. So there's that to look forward to. Yeah, good times.
Yeah, I got out of my jury duty. I was finally summoned after, I forget, I think it was just because of me being a full-time student still. They're just like, yeah, you don't have to worry about it. I'm like, good. I don't want to have to worry about doing that because I think it was going to happen over one of my trips that I was taking or something like that. I think I was going up to the mountains for some motorcycle riding, and I was going to be like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. It's tricky for me because on one hand I'm self-employed, so I have a very flexible schedule, but also I'm self-employed and I don't get paid for time away from work.
Right.
And it's not as though I'm just rolling in money to begin with, where a week or so of missed time has a pretty significant impact. So at my previous employment when I worked at the camera store, the income was mostly from hourly, but there was also some commission-based stuff as well. Right. Not a lot, but that at least could have been something. But I don't know. I don't think I'll have any luck getting out of it in my current position. But at least I was able to postpone it to a time when I'm kind of like between trips, not quite doing the spring backpacking trip and usually done with the winter stuff by then. So, something to look forward to.
I've always thought it would be interesting to do it, like to participate in it, but I know that like when I do get summoned and have to go and do it, it's going to be for the most boring thing in the world. Like someone just stole a soda from a gas station or something. Like,
Yeah.
give me something that's nitty gritty and good and actually entertains me for a bit here.
Yeah, I'm not sure you would. I'm not sure that's. I don't think you're going to have those TV moments where the person's like, you got me. This is just like at the end of one of those like Law and Order type shows or something.
Exactly.
I don't think you're going to be having those sort of moments so much.
No, I don't think so. But in other words, other news, however you want to word that, I guess. So I think I mentioned before that I had gotten submitted for a review of my work and some questions to Brooks Jensen of Lens Work. Okay. So finally, I have gotten the feedback from him.
Okay.
After about 2 months of waiting, and he was busy with the Trilogies book that they had just put out and holidays and all that other fun stuff. But nonetheless, I finally got that. I think it was 2 nights ago, so Tuesday night. And my sleeping habits have been absolutely terrible. So it was around, I think, 11 o'clock or so when he had sent it over.
Mm-hmm.
And this is at night, mind you. I'm like, okay, so do I really want to open this up and listen to this 40-minute video? And
so it's a video. That's interesting.
Yeah. So how it works is he essentially does a screen capture of the images that you submitted for review that he has opened up in the Lightroom catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'll do his whole discussion thing, and if he feels that it would be beneficial for more people to see, like for the community of Lenswork to see, he'll then post it online as long as you give him permission to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, do I really want to sit here for 40 minutes in bed, delaying sleep even further?
Yeah.
And possibly have my heart ripped out.
Yeah, good luck getting to sleep after that,
Yeah, exactly. Or do I want to delay this until morning, knowing that it's going to be one of the first things that I really have a desire to do?
Yeah.
And then have my entire day ruined, potentially.
Yeah.
It's a lose-lose situation depending on how or what is said.
Yeah, so what'd you do?
So I ended up listening to it at that night.
Mm-hmm.
Spent the 40 minutes. I split it up here and there into like a couple minute segments because I was like, all right, do I really want to listen to any further to this? But it was interesting because, first of all, he said good things about my work, especially like from a technical standpoint, that kind of thing. So that was nice to get that first 10-minute like dopamine boost. And I'm like, all right, I don't need to listen to the rest of this. I'm good.
Yeah.
But what was so interesting about it was looking back 2 months ago at the mindset that I was in regarding my photography and how much has changed so quickly.
Wow.
In regard to the questions that I asked him.
Yeah.
So when I submitted this, my mind was very heavily wrapped around the idea of selling my work essentially around money and financial success via photography.
Yes.
And then to listen back to this and just realize that my head's just not in that space right now. And it hasn't been in a while.
What do you think's changed?
Honestly, I think it's because of taking this 2-month sabbatical from photography. Not having picked up the camera, just doing the podcast, doing a little bit of writing here and there.
Yeah.
Focusing more heavily on the schoolwork at hand and trying to pick out what path is going to be best for me come graduation and all of that.
So having that sense of separation has given you a different view on things, it sounds.
Right. So the one thing that he did say throughout it about my work, he said that it was technically sound, that I obviously knew my way around photography and the camera, that kind of thing, and how to make a fine looking composition, that I had a solid eye, so to speak. But he did say that in terms of marketing my work, in terms of selling my work, looking at it really realistically, it's not the kind of stuff that's going to sell.
Yeah.
Which is just the truth of the matter. No one's going to look at it, like, because the one photograph that I had submitted is Memento Mori, which is a photograph of a deer skull on the forest floor. And he was like, as nice as this is, I don't think anyone's really going to want to hang this on their wall. I'm like, yeah, you got me there.
Yeah.
So right now it seemed to him, and this is truth, that my priority is to be 90% artist, 10% business. The reality of selling your work, though, is being 10% artist, 90% business in terms of time split and all of that.
I can see how that would be the case in that scenario, yeah.
So he was pretty much saying that he was pushing more toward keeping photography as a passion, as more of a hobby, something that keeps your drive with it if you want to be focused more on creating personally meaningful art, which is where I want to be at, rather than photographing for public appeal and for making a ton of money off photography. Yeah. Not necessarily that he was saying that it's impossible for me to sell any prints or any of the like of that, but more so just not to make that a priority. And I don't know if it was because I was just sleep deprived at that point, because it was past midnight by the time that I was done listening to it. I just found the whole thing kind of entertaining, kind of funny, just because of looking back at the questions that I had asked him and realizing that even without his review, all his review did was just prove to me that, yeah, this is where my head is at, like, and going forward where I want to be thinking about my photography more as a passionate pursuit, and have teaching or whatever may come be my primary means of income, which is totally different than what I thought 2 months ago, let alone 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So needless to say, it was, I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that I submitted to it and that I got that feedback from him. And it's given me a number of things to try out for this year that aren't necessarily monetarily focused, but are more things that I want to do for the sake of doing them.
Yeah. What type of stuff it comes to mind?
So for one, I want to start doing, I'm sure you've seen them. Sarah Marino posted a couple of those free ebooks. I think David Kingham just did one for a 2022 review of like 100 different images, and you have to sign up for his newsletter in order to download the PDF file for it.
Yeah.
I want to start doing more like free ebooks like that. I think A Morning Walk series is going to be a great contender for that, because it's work that not all of it I really want to put into a true portfolio to represent my voice, my vision, but it's still work that I'm proud of, especially as a collective. And that was one of the other things that he said, was that, yeah, my work may not be easily marketable to like the masses to make a ton of money, or to galleries because I don't have a name behind myself, but rather it would work well as a monograph, as like as a book. So that's obviously a goal of mine to get to, but for now, to have these little collectives like A Morning Walk, or just random ebook things to send out for free, just in exchange for newsletter subscription kind of deal.
When you're talking about the photos in the portfolio, especially the one of the deer skull, what I was picturing in my head, I mean, I've seen the picture, so I know what the picture looks like, but in my head, what I was picturing was actually turning the pages of a book. So it's interesting that you had mentioned, your work being used for a book or a collection of something along those lines. Because like when I think of some of the more impactful work that I've seen, usually it's a case where one image by itself, especially if it's simply viewed out of context, you look at it and you're like, okay, this is a picture of, I don't know, a tree or a deer skull or whatever. But when it's presented as a collection in a book and something accompanied by writing, perhaps, it elevates it to a different level. And it's far beyond the more mindless eye candy that I think people oftentimes have to, give up a little piece of their soul to produce that sort of work that is going to sell very well and people are going to want to hang on their wall.
Right.
It's a different level of work. So, I mean, I definitely see how producing work like that, yeah, it's not going to be the sort of thing that people are going to be lining up for with just fistful of money saying, hey, I want that deer skull on my wall yesterday. It's not going to happen. But as a book, as a collection, as, especially when accompanied by writing, I think there is a lot of potential for that. And, when you do that, plus you add time to the mix, and if you're very consistent with the work, or, the voice comes clear, I think far later down the line is when people are more interested in prints, because at that point they will build their own emotional connection with the work that will want them to have. They know that exact wall they want that deer skull on at a certain point,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely agree with the assessment that it's not the sort of thing that's necessarily people are going to be lining up to put on their wall right away. But as a collection of a body of work, especially when you add even more of your voice to it through writing or through the way that it's presented, I think it becomes a very powerful thing. And I think he's right that it's a matter of, continuing to create that work, build that work. And, time is a huge factor. It's a huge factor in order to have those doors open up with time.
Yeah, one of the other ideas that I have that I think would be really beneficial, and I may have mentioned it to you, I think in email before, but nonetheless, I want to do a free ebook that's just filled with advice from various photographers. Just a little paragraph or two of advice and some photographs to go along from photographers that have been in the industry for a while, like yourself, or I already have David Kingham. He sent me something for it. Matt Marash, then all these different names that you can think of. I have a list of over 50. Just something to give back that I think would be, or would have been beneficial to me, at least.
Yeah.
And just stuff like that. Stuff that I want to do for the sake of doing it. Yeah. Rather than thinking about how can I monetize this. Ultimately I need money. Like, it's just unfortunate reality, especially now because my only income is from NPN and the little bit of writing gigs that I get, which is going to make it even more difficult come student teaching. So that'll be interesting how things go about that. Anyway, but no, just to keep photography as a passion and see where that takes me this year. I do plan on, because I wrote down, as I'm working through my my website, I'm working on revamping it and everything. Okay. And I hope to have that done by middle of this month or so, before I get into student teaching and things get really hectic. But
yes, for sure.
So some of the things that I wrote down that I want to try are those like free ebooks, and I have a couple different ideas that are written down, but then long form essays, like 4,000 plus word kind of essay collectives. I have one written that is all about success. that I have to go through and review and all that.
Yeah.
But then ideas such as like creating a folio of my project revolving around North Resort, my family's cabin. Just like 10 prints packaged neatly with a little bit of like a synopsis of the project and how it started, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
And then offering like the ebook that I was briefly mentioned, the big collective ebook that I'm working on, and just small print shop of like 6 to 9 of my favorite images, 8 by 10 inch prints only for, I don't know, $50, $75 each, something like that. Just to throw it up there, see what happens, but ultimately not worry about it. Like if something happens, then something happens.
Yeah. And that's, see, I think that's a good approach in terms of, just like kind of I was saying earlier, where it's a mixture of different things and putting things out there, and it'll allow you to see some things perhaps will connect pretty well with those who look at it. But other things, it might be more of, the process itself of creating that you really connect with, right, and that perhaps kind of leads you down some other path that you're not aware of yet. So, I think that sounds like a pretty good approach, for the year ahead. And I'm going to be doing things, mostly the same as how I was doing it before, but with the zine project in as well, which is pretty easy for me to work on in the field. But same sort of thing where I can have a little bit of a feeling for how it's going to turn out, but I can't fully envision it yet. But I love that time when you have all these pieces that kind of start fitting together, and then you end up having what you had envisioned in your mind, becomes an actual thing. So I do look forward to that, and I think you'll see a lot of that this year ahead as well.
Yeah, I think it's a necessary step, especially after so many years where I've unnecessarily stressed over the monetary aspect of photography, which started out solely as a way to express myself and help with my mental health. And that stress of trying to make it happen where it becomes a full-time income was not doing the best of things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That stress feeds right back, and then it just like sabotages the very thing that you're working on to kind of get away from those stresses.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it also has a tendency to shape the final product in a not great way, where, people will know that, whatever technique someone else is doing has been popular for them. So even though you're maybe not necessarily have it in your mind that, I'm going to set out and do that as well, but you just know that, this is the formula other people have found for success. Maybe I should try that, but it leads you further away from the whole reason why I think any of us really pursued this in the first place. Because I don't think many people necessarily pick up a camera and say, I want to make money with this. Some people perhaps do, but I think most people pick it up and it's something that they're fascinated by, something that allows them to express themselves and to see things differently. But yeah, the moment that you have to be motivated by income, it definitely does change things. And I think staying resistant to that, while at the same time knowing that there is a path ahead some way that doesn't allow you to sacrifice, so much along the way, you have to be persistent with it. You have to, sometimes be willing to, pull out that machete and kind of, bushwhack your own path. So.
And I think the one thing that a lot of people who focus on trying to make photography into a full-time career, especially if they have a desire to be like, say, a landscape photographer, is the fact that you don't get out near as much as you think that you do.
No.
When you're doing it full-time. Like, even for me working with NPN, like I said, I haven't been out in 2 months. Just not because I don't want to be, not because I can't be, but just because I have so much other stuff on my plate. And yeah, of course, that's exacerbated by schoolwork, but still, if you're doing full-time work, just look at Thomas Heaton.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a prime example of someone who, okay, yeah, he gets out, but it's because he has to. Because if he doesn't get out and he's not producing a weekly video or so, then he's going to lose his entire business model. Whereas you compare that to someone like yourself, even, you only get out a few times a year.
Yeah.
Because you could probably get out more, but something is going to have to be sacrificed.
Yeah. It is amazing how it seems there is so much time to work on things until you flip that switch at some point to pursue photography as a career. And then you find that there's less time now. It makes no sense whatsoever. And it's not like I have tons of administrative tasks at home. I mean, I'll do the accounting stuff. It doesn't take that long to do. You know, I'll respond to emails and stuff. But at a certain point, I don't really know what happens to the time. It just goes away. But I always look at whenever I have a trip coming up, I always see that as the reward for all the work that's done other times of the year. Though I will say that this year, I really am hoping to do perhaps 2 visits to Death Valley this year. And maybe just to explore a little bit more and kind of get out there and you know, maybe without so much of the emphasis on photography. But I think that's one of the things that I miss in terms of I really don't have too much of an opportunity to get out without a camera. So that's something that would be nice to have a little more time being able to do that.
Yeah, I think for me too, the switching more toward a passion-focused approach is just the basic idea of, okay, if I don't have to put all of my time, all of my energy, all of my effort into photography because I'm not trying to make it full-time into some kind of thing like that, it frees up time to do other things, to experiment with other hobbies, to maybe like one of the goals that I wrote down that I've wanted to do for a while now is to learn guitar. Because so back before I picked up a camera, and shortly thereafter, I had actually been taking guitar lessons. And I don't know, I still regret it a little bit, the decision that I made, because it was a little rash. But I remember going in at one point and just saying, like, yeah, this is going to be my last session because I'm focusing on photography. Even though I was in high school, so I had a ton of free time.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really doing that much with photography at the time anyway. I was doing some portrait photographs, but most of that was reliance on weekends, and my guitar lessons were once a week during the week. So I'm not really sure where my head was at there, but ever since that, it's been something that I've wanted to pick up, and whether I go out and take lessons again, or I try and teach myself or whatever, it's something that I want to explore a little bit.
Yeah.
Another artistic venue. So.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting because I feel like when it comes to picking up something new, such as when you're picking up photography, there's a lot of it is heavily based on that initial enthusiasm, where it has the tendency to take over other things. So I can see how if you'd been taking guitar lessons, you're kind of getting going with that, but then all of a sudden there's this other bright, shiny thing, you know, like, ooh, photography. You know, it's almost like you're naturally going to pull the attention away from the guitar lessons towards that, you know, that bright, shiny object. And certainly with time, that enthusiasm fades a little bit as you kind of settle into things. You learn the limits, you learn the different approaches and the techniques and stuff like that. But I do see how, you know, giving it some time, you know, going back to learning the guitar, because I see that as being like a kind of therapeutic thing as well. Just like the repetitive motions, just perhaps, I mean, I've never, when I was a kid, I had piano lessons. I wasn't that great. I had violin lessons. I also wasn't that great. There would be these recitals where I just like fake play the violin because people's ears didn't need to hear what I was, able to play. But from my limited knowledge back when I was a kid, I do remember at least that, your mind does work a little bit differently when you're playing the instrument, perhaps in a bit of a way where when you're, setting up for a photo, you're not really thinking about it. You're just doing it. And it kind of puts you into like a certain state. So I can see how you might even pull some similarities between, working with a guitar, working with a camera, where it kind of, comes together and perhaps is a similar thought process, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I look at what Alistair Benn did for the book that he's putting out. I think it's Out of Darkness. I'll put a link as usual in the show notes, but he has this collector's edition that he's doing. So he has 3 different levels of editions that you could get. So you can get the just the book. You can get the book with a slip case, and I think it comes with 1 or 2 prints, small like 8 by 10 inch or whatever prints. And then he has the ultimate edition, however you want to designate that. I forget what he said it was, but it's the slip case, it's the prints, obviously the book. And then it also comes with a USB drive of music that he composed that goes right alongside of it.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's a very unique approach for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw that, and obviously I can't afford it. I think it's like $500 to $800 because obviously it took him a lot of time to compose the music and all of this other stuff. So nonetheless, I just love that idea of it's not music that you found or anything. It's music that you made, and it obviously is going to have a stronger connection, a stronger appeal to those looking at that work because of that personal connection between the two.
Yeah.
Like you can write the music that says the things that you want to say, much in the same way that you created the photographs in a way that you wanted them to say something.
Yeah, and that also gives me an idea. I mean, like for when I come up with the next ebook, I can create a edition that costs more, but that one does not come with me playing Mary Had a Little Lamb on a violin. So everyone else, you get Mary Had a Little Lamb on a violin, but the collector's edition does not include that. So I think that...
And there's no way to stop you from playing it.
There's no way to stop. Yeah.
As soon as you open up that file, as soon as it's downloaded, it plays.
Nothing but screeches and just horrible sounds.
That is a wonderful idea to get another like $10 from people.
Yes. I think I'm gonna use that approach. And I think we have Alistair Benn to thank for this fantastic idea. I'm totally twisting it for my own uses. But yeah, I think that would be great.
I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com, and you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.